Hello everyone. Welcome back to Steve's View. Today we're diving into a major development in US politics, the unofficial start of the 2026 midterm election season. Why do I say the start of the midterms? Because President Donald Trump has begun a nationwide campaign-style tour, and his first stop was in the state of Pennsylvania, one of the most politically important battlegrounds in the country. In this video, we're going to break down why Trump chose Pennsylvania, what themes he pushed in his first major speech, how the U.S. economy is actually performing based on available data, why media narratives differ so dramatically, what's going on with the One Big Beautiful Bill and the debate surrounding it, and what all of this means for the upcoming 2026 midterm elections. The goal here is not to take a side, but to help you understand what's happening, why it matters, and what the actual numbers tell us. So let's get started. Trump kicked off his nationwide tour in Pennsylvania, and that choice wasn't random. For decades, when people talked about swing states, the focus usually fell on Wisconsin or Michigan. But in the political landscape of the mid-2020s, Pennsylvania has become one of the most decisive battlegrounds in the entire country. Both parties now see it as essential for winning not only the presidency, but also governorships, Senate seats, and House majorities. Pennsylvania's demographics, shifting suburbs, and strong union presence make it a state where small changes in voter sentiment can flip major elections. So when Trump visited a relatively small Pennsylvania town and drew several thousand supporters, with many watching from outside the venue, it sent a message. The fight for Pennsylvania in 2026 has officially begun. Trump's rally speech centered heavily on one theme: the everyday cost of living and his administration's efforts to bring prices down. Let's break down the specific points he emphasized, and then we'll compare them with available economic data. Trump told supporters that bringing prices back to reasonable levels is his top priority. Inflation is declining, and several everyday items like eggs, butter, fruit, and pasta are now cheaper than before. He contrasted this with the Biden administration, saying inflation reached a 9.1% peak under Biden. To evaluate these claims, we can look at a few standard economic indicators. Inflation. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that inflation has fallen significantly compared to the highs seen earlier in the decade. Today, the annual inflation rate sits around 2.7%, slightly above the Federal Reserve's ideal target of 2%, but much lower than the peak of the early 2020s. So the trend is indeed downward. Food prices. Food price changes vary by region and item. Egg prices have dropped noticeably since their extraordinary spike due to supply chain issues and avian flu outbreaks. Some fruits and other produce have also become slightly cheaper, depending on season and supply. Butter and pasta vary more widely. Some areas have seen declines, others have not. In other words, Trump's examples reflect some real price declines. But the experience is mixed depending on where Americans live. Gasoline prices. This is one of the biggest points of emphasis. Trump cited an average national gas price of $2.95 per gallon. According to FAA, the American Automobile Association, several states indeed have gas prices below $3, and in a handful of states, prices have dipped below $2.50, while others, especially California, remain above $4 for various structural reasons, including taxes, refinery capacity, environmental rules, and distribution costs. So nationally, gas prices have come down, but the experience is far from uniform. The Commerce Department reports wages have grown moderately, around 4% after adjusting for inflation. Consumer spending remains strong, especially during the holiday season. Core inflation measures, like PCE, Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, have cooled. This suggests that while not every American feels relief, the overall economy has stabilized compared to the high inflation period earlier in the decade. In his speech, Trump criticized major news outlets, especially CNN, for painting a much more negative picture of the economy and of his administration's handling of it. This raises an important question. Why do some media outlets say inflation is easing, while others insist Americans still feel squeezed? The answer comes down to which data points you emphasize and whether the focus is economic theory or lived experience. Let's look at the major reasons. Economists often talk about a phenomenon called the vibes gap. This means economic indicators may show improvement, but people may still feel like things are difficult because prices remain higher than they were 3 to 4 years ago. Even if inflation slows, price levels don't go back down. They just stop rising as fast. So news outlets that focus on lived experience will emphasize groceries still cost more than before the pandemic. Rent remains high. Interest rates make mortgages steep. Outlets focusing on economic indicators will emphasize inflation is down, wages are up, consumer spending is strong, economic forecasts are improving. Both perspectives are technically true. They're just describing different parts of the picture. Media organizations have editorial cultures. Some focus more on systemic economic concerns. Others highlight improvements or positive outlooks. Both sides choose different stories, different data points, and different expert interpretations. This is why coverage feels contradictory, even when based on the same numbers. Trump criticized reports suggesting consumer confidence is near historic lows. Some surveys indeed show weakened consumer sentiment, while others, like the University of Michigan's research, show improving expectations for inflation and personal finances. Different institutions use different survey methods, samples, and weighting systems. This produces contrasting headlines such as "Consumer confidence hits a low point" versus "Americans feel increasingly optimistic about the economy." Both can be true depending on time period, demographics, and question phrasing. Another major topic in the speech concerns the One Big Beautiful Bill, a tax-related policy intended to reduce the financial burden on working Americans. Let's break down what the policy does and why it has become a partisan flashpoint. Key elements include reducing or eliminating taxes on overtime pay, reducing or eliminating taxes on tips, primarily benefiting service industry workers, additional tax credits for families with young children, various tax relief measures intended for middle-income households. Supporters argue that the act helps working-class Americans keep more of their earnings, reduces financial strain, encourages labor force participation. The Treasury Department criticized several Democrat-led states, Colorado, New York, Illinois, and Washington, D.C., for allegedly failing to implement certain provisions of the act. These states did not publicly respond, so the details of the dispute remain somewhat unclear. However, states may have various reasons: budget constraints, administrative concerns, disagreements about federal-state authority, political opposition to Trump-era or Republican-backed legislation. Without direct statements from the states, we can't conclude intentional obstruction. However, the disagreement highlights how federal policies often run into state-level complexities. For everyday Americans, the main takeaway is some tax relief measures may not be implemented uniformly. Workers in certain states may receive benefits that others do not. The issue will likely become a talking point in the 2026 midterm campaigns. Tax policy is often one of the strongest motivators for voters on both sides. The 2026 midterm elections will determine who controls the House of Representatives, the Senate, dozens of governorships, and hundreds of state legislative seats. No matter which party someone supports, polls consistently show that inflation, wages, and affordability are the top concerns for American voters. This means if people feel financially more secure by late 2025 and 2026, Republicans may benefit. If they feel the opposite, Democrats may frame the election around economic dissatisfaction. Both parties know this, which is why economic messaging is becoming the central theme even this early. This early nationwide tour allows Trump to shape the narrative before Democrats define it, reconnect with working-class communities in swing states, highlight economic data favorable to his administration, criticize states and institutions he views as obstructing policy implementation. The strategy resembles early presidential campaign efforts, even though this is technically for the midterms. By the end of 2025, new annual economic reports will be released. These reports will influence media narratives, voter confidence, political messaging, the tone of both parties' campaigns. If inflation continues downward and wages remain strong, Republicans may argue their policies are working. If economic indicators weaken, Democrats may shift the conversation towards social issues, governance, or state-level achievements. Either way, 2026 will be framed as a referendum on economic management. So, what did we learn from Trump's first major speech of the 2026 cycle? 1. He chose Pennsylvania for strategic reasons. It's one of the most consequential battlegrounds in the country. 2. His main message is the economy. He focused on inflation, wages, gas prices, and food costs. 3. Economic data presents a mixed but improving picture. Inflation is down, wages are up, but price levels remain higher than they were a few years ago. 4. Media narratives differ because they focus on different indicators. Some highlight statistical improvement, others emphasize persistent cost of living challenges. 5. The One Big Beautiful Bill is a major political battleground. Some states are adopting its provisions fully, others are not, creating tension between federal and state authorities. 6. The 2026 midterms will likely revolve around affordability, not foreign policy, not social issues, the economy. As this campaign season unfolds, we can expect more rallies, more data, and more competing narratives about the state of the economy and the direction of the country. And our goal on this channel will continue to be helping you cut through the noise, understand the facts, and make sense of what's happening. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.